Howdy guys, Bookie Laura here, and it's time for my May wrap-up. So this month I read 4 books. I must admit to being a little bit disappointed with it, but to be honest, there was a time when 3 books was pretty average, so to have read 4 and be disappointed is probably a good thing. As usual, I've got a mixture of books that I read as part of a book club and books that I chose to read for myself. It's been a real mixed bag this month. Some books that I've absolutely loved and probably consider some of the best books that I've read this year, and some that have probably been, the worst that I've read this year. So the first book that I read this month was You Can't Keep a Good Woman Down by Alice Walker, who also wrote The Colour Purple, in case you didn't realise. This was a selected book for the Feminist Orchestra Book Club, which I will leave a link to. I'm intending to do a video on my book club books for the month, so I don't want to say too much, but me and this book just did not click. To be honest, I wasn't a fan of The Colour Purple, although most people in the world seem to love it. I wasn't a fan of The Colour Purple at all, but I thought I'd give it a go anyway because it was only a thin old book, and I thought, why not? But it was a similar feeling. There was nothing actively wrong with it, I just didn't really connect with it as a book. I found it quite hard to convince myself to keep reading. I was actually quite pleased because it's a collection of short stories. I think if it had been one story, I would have found it really hard to keep going. But the fact that it was short stories meant that I always felt, well, I've only got to get through, a handful of pages before I get on to something different. So that helps me to stay motivated. I gave this 2 out of 5 stars on Goodreads, which is, I think, the lowest that I've given this year. And it's not a bad book, I just felt that I just didn't connect with her writing style, and yeah, I just couldn't get absorbed into the stories. The second book that I read this month was a library book, and that was The Fifth Wave by Rick Yancey. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads, really enjoyed the story, much more than I expected. For me, it was a really good story. It had a fast-paced ending, haha, heard that before. It was quite twisty and turny. The thing that I really enjoyed about it was the way that you had all these different characters, and it was sort of telling separate stories, but in the end they all became intertwined, and I kind of like that in books that I read. In terms of negatives, the YA thing, once again, I find often when I read young adult books that I find the emotions that people are experiencing a little juvenile. A lot of what they're doing and the way they're behaving doesn't feel believable. But I sort of accept it at face value, I suppose. It's a good story, it's fast-paced, it's a really interesting concept. I hadn't realised when I started reading it that it's part of a series, but I think I'd be inclined to read the others, but then I don't feel hugely motivated that I've got to read them. So yeah, good book. If you like YA stuff, you'll really like it. Rightio, the third book that I read this month was probably definitely my favourite of the month, and that's Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. I have done a full and thorough review of this book, which I will leave a link to, should I remember. Basically, I just love it. I think this has got huge value. It is a fantastic sci-fi story set in the future, but also it's got that nostalgia, gamer geek from the past element too, which adds something quite different to it. And I think that the pop culture references are a reason that a lot of people have decided to read the book, but actually, even if you took all of those out, the story on its own is fantastic. It is fast-paced, exciting, interesting, and really well thought out, very futuristic, and that tickles my fancy all over. Also, I must admit that I do love books where the main character is quite annoying and has a lot of flaws, but you still root for them. So, well done, Ernest. Fourth and final book that I read this month was the book club book for the Rory Gilmore Book Challenge. P.S. Just started watching Gilmore Girls again from the start. Just watched the first episode of season 1. It's just brilliant. Everyone should rewatch it. The Crucible by Arthur Miller. Basically, it's a play set around the idea of the Salem witch trials. I'm intending to do a more detailed account of this in my book club review video, so look out for that. But I enjoyed it. I gave it 3 stars, and that's probably a bit harsh. It's probably a 3.5 rather than a 3 or a low 3. It's an enjoyable read. I enjoyed this much more than I thought, particularly when you look at how the cover is not terribly exciting. If I'm honest, I was reading it because it was a book club book and I thought it's a play and let's just read it so I can sound all wonderful and intelligent, but I was really surprised by how much I enjoyed it. There were actual times where I felt actual emotions reading this book, and I honestly did not see that coming. So those are the 4 books that I read this month. I'd say it's probably a pretty average reading month, not a great one, but then I have been really quite busy. My sister had a baby this month, so we've been travelling. She lives like 5-hour drive away, so I lost a weekend to that. I also lost a week and a bit to having labyrinthitis, so I'm pretty pleased to have read this many books this month and looking forward to smashing this next month and reading trillions. Thanks for watching, guys. If you've read any of these books, let me know what you think. I love to hear what you think and see if your views are similar to mine. I will see you next time. Bye bye.